Welcome to Ideas in Action, the official University of Southern California podcast. This show was recorded live on USC's campus.
I'm going to introduce our panelists one by one, and then we will get into a conversation. As I mentioned, this is on this humongous projector. Lenita, I don't know if you can feel it in your bones, but you are humongous right now.
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it.
Oh, you're seeing it. Oh, yeah, you can see. You're
Yeah.
much bigger than anyone else in this room.
Yeah.
Lenita Jacobs is an associate professor in the departments of American Studies and Ethnicity and Anthropology at USC. Trained in linguistic anthropology, she has studied African American women's hair care, African American children coping with acquired or traumatic brain injuries, and African American stand-up comedy. Her fieldwork across sites of hair care, hospitals, and humor coalesce around a central question. How do speakers construct a sense of themselves as individuals and community members without ever forgetting the socio-political stakes animating their everyday lives? Last year, she published her second book, To Be Real, Truth and Racial Authenticity in African American Stand-Up Comedy, which is based on long-term observations and interviews with Black comics from 2001 to 2008. Let's give a round of applause for Lenita Jacobs. Lenita, I just have a quick, cute question for you, which is out of the songs To Be Real by Cheryl Lynn, Real Love by Mary J. Blige, or Keep It Real by the Jonas Brothers, which one is your fave and why?
Gotcha. I empathize with the Jonas Brothers, that you can shine bright and still keep it real. And of course, I see Mary when she's searching for a real love. I really do. But my first and forever love will be Cheryl Lynn, To Be Real, for all the reasons.
Great. Are there any Cheryl Lynn fans out here in the audience? Yeah. I think that actually means that, Lenita, unfortunately, you have to sing a little bit of it for us.
To be real. That's all I got.
Yeah, it's got to be real. It's got to be. Christina Wong, sitting to my left, is a Doris Duke Artist Award winner, Guggenheim Fellow, and a Pulitzer Prize finalist in drama. She's a performance artist, comedian, writer, and elected representative who has been presented internationally across North America, the UK, Hong Kong, and Africa. Her show, Christina Wong's Sweatshop Overlord, just had a 4-week run at the Kirk Douglas Theater in Los Angeles. Who saw it? Did anyone see it? Yeah, all right.
Yes.
Great. And details her accidental founding of the Auntie Sewing Squad, a volunteer mutual aid mask sewing collective that sewed 350,000 masks for vulnerable communities during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Auntie Sewing Squad has collectively written a book about their work, The Auntie Sewing Squad Guide to Mask Making, Radical Care, and Racial Justice, published by University of California Press. Christina, in part of your show, you request from the audience that they throw their bras on stage. Sorry, spoiler alert. So you can harvest the elastic for mask making. What is the weird...
Is that real? Is it a real thing?
Yeah, it happens. Oh, you didn't see the show?
I haven't seen the show yet.
Oh, interesting.
So what if
it's
you're
too
wearing
late.
like a girdle or something?
Well, it's not a demand. It's not like throw your bra on stage or get out.
How many?
Wayne missed my show, so let's.
Yeah.
let me
Okay,
answer
that's not
my
the point. The
question.
point is
Let me.
The
answer
question
my
is, what is the weirdest thing someone threw on stage in that section of the show?
So some audience members had come back knowing that they could declutter,
Yeah.
and there was one night someone had cut they said jockey. It was one round elastic, so I'm assuming they cut the strips of elastic. Like they were kind enough not to throw the dirty part
Right,
or the dirtier part.
Yeah.
And she was just.
Wow.
Like slingshotting
Yeah.
underpants elastic.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Yes.
that'll be a fun mask to wear, by the way.
Yeah. Someone is wearing that mask somewhere. And Wayne, who's the one over there, Wayne Fetterman is a stand-up actor, author, producer, and cultural historian. You may recognize him from Curb Your Enthusiasm, What We Do in the Shadows, Step Brothers, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, and The 40-Year-Old Virgin, and Legally Blonde. He won an Emmy Award for producing the documentary George Carlin's American Dream. Yes, it's very recent.
Home Box Office was
Yeah.
the streaming service.
Yeah, home box office. And you have the Emmy displayed in your house?
It's in the box, but it's on the piano. Yes.
He's the author of the best-selling book, The History of Stand-Up, From Mark Twain to Dave Chappelle, which he'll be happy to sign after the
Yeah.
panel. Everyone will be signing their books after the... Oh,
Right.
well, Lenita, it would be impossible.
I'll sign Lenita's book.
Okay.
I'll sign Lenita's book.
The history... Happy sign. He is also an adjunct professor here at USC, where he teaches the history of stand-up comedy. Let's welcome Wayne Fetterman.
Thank you. Nice to be here at this lecture hall. I thought it was a theater, but you
Yeah,
corrected
no,
me.
this is
Yeah.
a lecture hall. And I'm, full disclosure, I am actually Wayne's boss.
True.
Yes, I am. I am a much less knowledgeable, less experienced, nicer person.
That my reputation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
Smart,
take it.
smart and mean.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Your question is, Wayne, I know you are a
Yes.
big basketball nut.
Yes, I am.
You have also written a book about Pistol Pete Maravich.
Yes.
The
44
Laker-
points a game. I'm just going to yell out stats.
The Lakers and Clippers are currently both in the playoffs.
Yes, they are.
Which team has the best chance of
It
winning it
all
all?
depends on the health of Kawhi
Oh.
Leonard. I hate to be someone who but it all depends on Kawhi Leonard.
If Kawhi comes back and he's healthy, who is
I
the
thought I
best
was going to be talking about Will Rogers, and now here I am talking about Kawhi Leonard. But yeah, if Kawhi Leonard can come back, and I think the Clippers have a better shot. There you go. I hate
Okay,
to
all
say it.
right. Wow.
Oh, Clipper. Okay, the Clippers.
Hot take.
Hot take.
Okay,
hot
and
take.
just a reminder, I did just say it, but all the books are for sale up where we came in the lobby, and Christina and Wayne will be up there signing books after.
Or if you just want to say hi, I don't want to
Yeah.
pressure
Yeah, yeah,
someone. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse.
Okay,
You're
great.
only allowed to talk
you
to
can
him
bu-
if
you
you
should buy my
book.
book, though.
Oh, you're
If
right.
you
Yeah.
can't budget between me and Wayne, pick my.
Okay, let's get into it. Wayne, in your book, The History of Stand-Up,
Yeah.
which I have read, you describe this moment.
You
where-
make it sound like it was a chore to get through it. Was it that hard?
No, it's good. It's good.
Oh, thanks for the glowing review.
It's very good. I learned a lot.
Okay.
You describe this moment we're in currently as a second boom
Yes.
for stand-up comedy, like a sort of comedy Easter.
I never used that term, but yeah. Go. You mean that, like a
Resurrection.
Yeah, a resurrection.
That you got it.
I got
Good,
it.
yeah.
I got it. I was thinking. Yeah.
Can you tell us what about this era currently
Uh-huh.
is boomish, and how it compares to the first boom, which was the 80s,
Yeah.
right?
Started in the late 70s, but
Yeah.
yes, definitely in the 80s.
Okay, yeah.
Well, basically, it's fueled by the internet. And so many comedians now directly interact with their fans and can build a base of fans that will come out to shows. And one of the great things about doing comedy is that we travel. It's not like we're a band where there's a lot of logistics. We'll go anywhere. So I know you travel internationally, so it's just really supercharged the whole medium of stand-up comedy, and from podcasting to even direct, Instagram, Twitter, all of that has really helped comedians. And so by the way, there was a comedian named Gabriel Iglesias who sold out Dodger Stadium. That's something like Bob Hope or Milton Berle or the other guys I read about in this book or Dick Craig would never even think of. That's how big it is now. And Burr did the same thing with Fenway Park. So we're in a real and then little theaters and then comedy.
Burr meaning Bill Burr.
Yeah, and then little comedy clubs are still flourishing and medium-sized. Like I was just in New York City, the Comedy Cellar has 4 rooms. From 6:30 to 2 o'clock on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, every room is sold out. So people really like seeing comedians, and especially when people saw them like on Instagram, like maybe working a crowd or dealing with a heckler, people are like, oh, this is really interesting. Can I say one more quick thing? And then
No.
okay.
No, fine. You can. You can.
No, I often think about like when I'm scrolling through the Netflix, like scrolling through the options, and you see like a multi-million dollar, maybe a $50 million movie or an $80 million movie or a television show that costs $8 million an episode. And then right next to that, you can click on one person standing on stage talking into a microphone. Like that's the whole show. And that gets just many times more interaction than these big budgeted things. So it's a really incredible, accessible form of entertainment that's been going on since I talk about it in my book since the 1800s. So,
Great, Christina. Wayne was just talking about traveling, that comedians can travel, and you just kind of toured your show around the U.S. and you're continuing doing that. What have you experienced in terms of different crowds or different receptions based on your where you are located or where you're doing the show?
Well, in general, I will say I performed in Nigeria, and I'm not that funny in Nigeria, I think. I don't. All the reference points are different.
Right.
The U.S. consulate that brought me. This was an older show called the Wall Street Journal, which is. I went to Uganda, did volunteer work, ended up making a hit rap album with local rappers. Anyway, so and I think they thought, oh, there's a show about an African country. We'll just, we'll program it here. It was an American programmer, and like all these references to my life as an Asian American and all these sort of like things about my identity in the context of America was not really that interesting in Nigeria, and they watch very differently. This is not to say my shows sucked. It's just in Nigeria I kind of sucked, but I still put in my resume that I toured Africa. But they were watching like it was a music concert. They would just like get up and like, and I'm like, I'm doing theater here, and it was just so it was rough. And also they couldn't really advertise it because the U.S. consulate was bringing it, and they were like, there's a strike on the campus where you're performing, and if we advertise that the U.S. consulate is bringing this, the strikers will just come into the performance and like weaponize. And I was like, oh my god, this is so much. So I will say there's definitely a context that has gotten lost when I've toured internationally. I still do. But with this recent show, Sweatshop Overlord, Christina Wong Sweatshop Overlord, which is about how I ran a mask sewing group in the pandemic, and literally was becoming the sweatshop overlord of 800 aunties sewing masks. I will say that it's I guess the only difference in LA, it went over really well. But I would say older subscriber audiences were just less vocal. They still enjoyed it. They came, but they were, they just, it was more,
Interesting.
But that's but I also have with this particular show, because it goes through the pandemic, and sort of my reactions to the pandemic were very specific. I have gotten offers to come to places like Florida or Wyoming, and I because it's such an exhausting show, I can't do every single city that's offered. So I've more been playing coastal cities, mostly because I know for how exhausting it is. I also don't want to be pushing uphill with an audience.
Yeah, very interesting. You mentioned the way that Nigerian audiences responded differently to your show. I always think that is so interesting that there is audience decorum that varies greatly depending on where you are, not just in this country, but in the world, which makes me think about Lanita in your book, To Be Real, where you studied African-American comedy in approximately the decade after 9/11. And you talk about a lot of black comedy nights where the audience is very vocal. There's like, I can't remember the name of the one show, but there's the show where I think you can get booed off of stage. Yeah. And that kind of like honest response to comedy excites me a lot. I think like subscriber audiences tend to be more docile or polite or I guess passive, you could say. Lenita, do you want to speak to that? What your experience was when you were
Oh
studying?
yeah,
Yeah.
happily, happily. Ari Spears used to go on stage, and he would talk about the differences between Black audiences and other audiences. And I don't think I can curse online, but the idea is that Black audience would see another Black comedian on stage and be like, "Make me laugh, MF," and the comic knows that they have to either bring it, or the audience will slowly start chiming in and might eventually drown out the comic. Part of this is socialized too by what we saw in Comic View and Def Comedy Jam, where comics would come out on stage and actively enlist the co-participation of audience members, either in a kind of heckling back and forth. Do not heckle, do not heckle any comedian, but especially do not heckle Black comedians, because they will bring new meaning to the word destroy or destruction and the like.
I have
Um,
a Aries Spears story. I critiqued. I
tell it,
tweeted.
tell
I
it.
tweeted at him after seeing a show he did in Portland, where he's picking on transgender folks and saying there's only two genders, and if you aren't born with a vagina, you're not a woman, and saying that Indian men have small penises and no one wants, which is not true. I mean, just based on my personal research, and anyway, and I tweeted, I was like, I think you have great timing, but like, I was kind of disappointed in your work. And him and his followers proceeded to like come after me, and it was very scary. Some of the tweets, like he actually said, "You need a D in you," but he spelled it out. Yeah. So just so you all knew.
Yeah.
But it was a very different take on what, he was like, "I don't think you're funny." Like he just started to come after me. But anyway. Sorry,
Yeah,
Lenita.
Christina's hitting at the consequences of stand-up comedy. Meaning one of the other responses of what Wayne was talking about, the internet, social media, building up followers, is that comics also develop a very virulently protective fan base who will use said media to protect the comedian or the like. Empathy, Christina, empathy.
Okay, great. Thank you. Wayne, I wanted to ask you, you've had a lot of, yes?
First of all, I just want to say that Florida does have coastal cities.
That's true. That's true. The coastal elite is what I was going for.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The coastal elite.
All right.
Thank you, Wayne.
You're welcome.
Thank you for fact checking Christina. We need that kind of
Yeah, that's the kind of
scrupulous listening.
That's all I do is I observe and then.
Oh yeah, you never talk. You just listen. All you do is, Wayne. Speaking of talking on
Yeah.
stage, you've had a lot of experience on the circuit, doing
Yes,
stand-up and all sorts of
yes.
places. What has your experience been in regards to what Lenita is describing in terms of a vocal or responsive audience? And
Well, it's interesting because it's very interesting because some comedians invite it. They'll ask rhetorical questions of the crowd. They're like, has anyone ever played Monopoly? And next thing you know, and then they're interacting with the crowd, and that's part of their show. I'm not a crowd work comedian. Like when people like yell at, or I very rarely get heckled, but when I do, I tend to get I just go right at them. I go, look, you're hurting me right now. And that kind of, it's just like make them feel bad. And
do you try and cry? You try?
No, because I'm not that emotionally in touch with myself. But I try. This is what I try to do. I try to create a theater. Like I try to get a role going. I assume that's so that's sort of my job, is to make that crowd laugh. And sometimes, especially now, very popular online. I don't know if you've seen it. Is like comedians doing crowd work. Like, where are you? The class, everything from the classic. Like, what do you do? Where are you from? My first one I ever heard really made me laugh was, I'll do it with you. Like, where are you from, Zach?
New York City.
I'm sorry?
New York City.
No, I heard you. I'm just sorry. So I remember that. So I remember that joke, but it was like the second time he did it, was like, oh, this is not really that spontaneous.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So, and so anyway, so what was your question? Do I have?
I don't know.
No, crowds don't really heckle me.
Yeah, they don't bother you because you're so intimidating physically.
Why are you attacking me? What did I do?
Great. So but excuse me. You did mention,
Yeah.
these kind of very live moments that happen,
Oh, yeah.
not exclusively, but tend to happen in the comedy world.
Can I just before you even say that, because I was thinking Lenita just made me think of there's an incredible moment where a comedian had been heckled. And the next comedian came on and preempted the whole thing. And his name is Bernie Mac. And if you ever get a chance to watch this clip of him on Def Comedy Jam, Lenita, and he preempts getting heckled. And he's like, I'm not afraid of you, MF compound word. And then it's
And then he starts his set.
It's incredible. He actually incorporates it throughout the entire set.
Yeah,
it's one of the most brilliant pieces of comedy that's out there. I write about it in my book. You don't have to buy it.
But I do always have a book you do have to buy.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say before you interrupted me was,
I love it.
was that that stand up, because it's live, because it's a direct relationship to
Yes.
the audience. If it's stand up or solo performance, which is what Christina does, it still is a direct relationship to the audience.
Yeah.
So it's like you are more present than you would be, let's say, in fourth wall theater that wants to sweep you away to some other circumstances that don't exist in this room. Things happen, and we all know about the huge things that have been happening recently, like the Oscars with Chris Rock and Will Smith, or Dave Chappelle getting attacked on stage, or Lenita writes about the Michael Richards outburst that happened.
Laugh Factory.
At the Laugh Factory. So I guess my question is, why does, aside from the direct relationship that I just described, what is it about comedy that invites these things? Also, by the way, we mentioned the bra moment in Christina's show, but there's also other things written into Christina's show. Like, for example, she has us turn to the person next to us at a certain point in the show and address the person next to us, whether we know them or not, as auntie, and see how it feels. And it does feel very uncomfortable. And in a very good way. I mean, that's what theater is supposed to do, right?
That's what theater's supposed to do?
Yes. Yes. You didn't know?
No.
So I guess, what about comedy invites this sort of thing? And where are we in terms, in terms of the history of comedy and these events that have happened? Go ahead, Wayne.
Oh, do you want to go ahead?
You go.
Okay, now. All right. Well, there's a number of things you brought, a number of little issues you brought up. One is, what I love about stand-up comedy is that it is one of the few interactive arts. Like how you say your punchline and when you say that is very much dependent on the laughs, not laugh of the audience, or their response. Unlike, let's say, a painter who's not going to, every time they paint, turn around like, what do you think? Or even a musician. You might be able to play that song the best way you've ever done it, but you can't do that with stand-up. You can't do it in front of the mirror. You can practice, but to really do it, it's an interactive, it's almost a live back and forth. So that's what's incredible to me about this art form / craft. The problem is a lot of comedy, there's usually, in most jokes, there's like a victim in most jokes. That if you really dig down, there's a victim.
There's a butt of the joke.
Some, not for all. I mean, obviously, Seinfeld does stuff about cotton balls inside an aspirin bottle. I don't know if anyone gets upset about that. But, but there, for a lot of part, there is sort of a victim. So people get offended and people want to respond to that. Or people, like what happened with Chris Rock, Will got very offended about what he thought was a slight against his wife and violently went after the guy. But this is people have been complaining and yelling and about comedians and protesting comedians. I read them in the book since the late 1800s. It's not a new thing. It's just been supercharged with the internet a little bit. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say.
Christina?
I mean, when I was describing my fight with Ari Spears, is like we can now talk back at them.
But you also had to deal with his followers,
his
right?
following and feeling completely outnumbered and going, why did I even bother? But I have to now fight this because this is like to me a moral thing, and my whatever morals I've left. These are the morals I've left. But yeah, I do feel like there's something that has shifted, and now we have it goes into other work I've done is that these performers are now our politicians. Right, we have reality stars who are in public office.
Right.
We have Al Franken, who became a governor and now is going back to doing television. Right, so we sort of seamlessly have become. It's not just like performers are up here and the audience is here. It's we're all just sort of in this big messy conversation with each other.
Yeah, I think it's exciting, until somebody gets attacked on stage. But this has been going on for a lot. Richard Belzer, who recently passed away, was a comedian in New York, and I remember he got attacked on stage, like at Catch a Rising Star in the '70s, and it's happened before. So it's just I hope it doesn't become
More
endemic.
aggressive.
Is that
yeah.
right? Endemic? I'm a professor.
Endemic.
Okay.
Yeah. Lenita, is it endemic correct?
It's endemic.
Did you want to speak to this, Lenita? Or
No,
Yeah,
I
go
was just listening to Christina and Wayne, and I was thinking about the moment of that slap. Wayne knows that it was something I wasn't willing to talk about in our first book talk together because I felt like whatever transpired, that's something between Chris and Will, and it's beyond my purview. But Marlon Wayans gives me a reason to intone, in part because his recent special, where he shows himself to be a stand-up comedian, wrestles with questions of accountability, love, and forgiveness. And so far as his stand-up routine does a lot, it reconciles his fraught relationships with Chris, but it also exists because he knows Chris and he knew Jada, they hung out. He had a crush on her. So in some ways, in the world of Black stand-up comedy, things that sometimes people may not touch, he could touch because he had a personal relationship with them, which meant that he could use his stand-up to do something like that. I'm thinking about Monique's recent special too on Netflix, where she said some things, unapologetic things about various Black icons like Oprah Winfrey and Tyler Perry, among others, and may have faced consequences for that. But in her recent special, not only does she do a bunch of stuff related to gender and sexuality, but she also, in some ways, accounts for her outburst towards them. So what I'm doing is trying to say that in this age of internet, not only are people talking to each other, but stand-up comedy is also becoming a space where people are holding each other accountable, calling for people to be accountable on a very public, if not global, stage.
Great, thank you, Lenita. So I was wondering how we could get something like the incidents that we are describing to happen this afternoon. To what can I say about
To get somebody to attack me? I got it. I know what you're after.
or what can you say to me to justify me attacking?
Oh, I see you jumping over.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be fun. But Lenita, as a follow-up, I guess I am interested because you studied so in depth that time period in the early 2000s, and you're describing Marlon Wayans and Monique's recent specials. How have you seen comedy progress in the last 20 some odd years, or I guess digress would be the opposite? Where have we come since your book?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say, Zach, I really like your hair.
Oh, thank you
and
very
so
much.
full and
Yeah,
and
I
That's
like
an
it too.
attack on
I-
me. I get it. I get it.
yeah,
It's fine. It's
yeah.
no big deal.
Lenita, in high school, my hair was a curse. It did not go over very well, but
Mhm.
now people like it, and I like it too. So thank you very much.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think Wayne covered it. I mean, the internet changes a lot of things. And I'm waiting to catch up on Hurry Kondabolo's YouTube special,
Yep.
Vacation Baby, where he said, screw Hollywood. I'm not waiting for them to recognize me. I'm just taking this straight to YouTube and see what I can make happen from that. The whole reel, the notion of a actor's reel or a comedian's reel has changed, with people producing bite-sized, phone-friendly clips with which to build a following on places like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. No longer are people having to cut their teeth in New York and then land in Los Angeles in hopes of finding their Netflix special or their deal. So with that comes plethora of stand-up comedians. But what it means for me, I went to the clubs because I love the club. I'll say it again and again and again. I like that moment. Christina and Wayne know it well, where you grab the mic, you greet your audience, and there's silence for just a second. And in that moment, as a mic plays with the silence, and you're waiting for the audience to respond, if at all, anything can happen. It's just absolutely magic. And I love the feeling of the clubs. And I would say now comedy is coming in all sorts of different spaces. I'm really happy to hear that the clubs in New York are full, but comedians have multiple pathways. And some of them are comedic actors and actresses. And in some ways, the comedy that they produce is very different from the comedy you might see from a comic who has cut their teeth by standing on a stage with nothing but a mic and their experience and their voice.
Christina, what's your relationship to the internet? Or go.
Yeah, well, I think an academic, because I'm not an academic, but I listen to academics and quote them. And Rachel Lee described stand-up as like vertical telling of comedy, and then like theater or the sitcom is like the horizontal version where you see it all played out, right? This is the stand-up is very like, here's an idea, here's a little sketch of what that might look like. You do an act out. But and I think for me, I tend to prefer the horizontal, right? Like let me have a set out and props and a projection, and in that, and I prefer the rules of the theater over the rules the audience comes in, where like, if I am not funny, that's your fault. I'm actually poignant. Yes, it's but you can't. There's certain settings like a 2-drink minimum club where you cannot afford to be poignant. Like the audience will scream back at you, what the hell? What is this? Or be more demanding. And so for me, I think that's why I preferred the format of theater to be the funniest person in the theater versus the more poignant and person in the stand-up club.
Well, I think we're talking about comedy and stand-up, and those are slightly different areas. That's all. So, yeah, I mean, there's no better example of someone who straddles those two worlds to me than this genius kid named Bo Burnham. I don't know if you've ever got a chance to see what he does, because he can do jokes straight in a club, and then he'll create, direct, score.
Horizontal.
Yeah, the horizontal. I mean, on a level that I had never seen before, especially during the pandemic. His special was just incredible to me. So, again, we're living in this world where you're just limited by your imagination, and the fact that we have 4K cameras in our pocket is incredible. So, but my book is more about just. Okay, never mind. All right, I get what you're saying. No, I concentrate. My area of expertise is stand-up, because I feel like it's a very specific area of comedy and entertainment.
Christina or Wayne, do you use the internet as a venue for material? Yeah, how do you
Yes.
use it?
So one of my very first projects was a fake mail order bride website called Big Bad Chinese. This is dial-up internet. You're missing some good stuff, folks. I'm talking about my fake porn site.
We're losing people. We're losing people.
I think the people are leaving because they know this is being recorded as a podcast and they can listen to it later.
But and that was my way of confronting an audience that I never would want to meet in person, which is someone pants down trying to find a mail order bride.
Right.
I don't want to try to find those people
Yeah.
and bring them into a theater.
Yeah.
But I want them to sort of experience my humor and my like little kick in the nuts from a safe distance online. So that's where I started using it, basically to trap audience members too. That was another way to, how do you get people, I know very well as someone who does live theater, and not everyone's going to be able to make the show live. So, but there are other ways to sort of present humor virtually, but the dedication to that versus coming into the theater and watching me alone for 90 minutes is much different. Experience is different.
Well, I just want to speak about the history a little bit, because one of the common themes in stand-up is adapting to new technologies. So this is whether it was records in the early part of the century, the last century, in 1913, the first comedy record, million-selling comedy record. But especially in the 50s, there was this guy, Bob Newhart and Shelley Berman and Mort Saul, and then later Dick Gregory put out albums. And there was a lot of older comedians who, very much like during the internet thing, were like, I'm a club comedian. This is where I go. I play Las Vegas. I can make 18 grand a week, 22 grand a week. Why am I putting out an album? But these were all younger comedians, realized, oh, this might be an opportunity, very much like Instagram, to connect with people, build my own audience, and gain some fame. So it's like this story keeps repeating itself over and over again.
Isn't it interesting, the cycles of all these things, and we get duped into feeling like this is new, that this is happening for the first time, but everything is so cyclical, like you're talking about all the new medium and adapting to the new media. Right. Also, cancel culture feels like this thing that is like happening to us right now. But you earlier in our talked about how this is not anything new. And your pal Cliff Nesteroff, who's very active on Twitter and is coming out with a new book called, I think it's called Outrageous or something, which is about this exact issue about the history of what we are now calling cancel culture, but isn't something that is new. I just think it's interesting. We are constantly.
But I will say today it's a little more magnified because so many people can join a movement as opposed to, I don't like what Steve Allen said on the Tonight Show last night.
Right.
And 4 people write a letter. Now you can have hundreds of thousands of people text, Jimmy Kimmel or.
I guess something that's interesting is the comic part of it, the sensitivity of the comics,
right?
And the complaints from the comics saying, "Oh, you can't say anything anymore. I'm being censored everywhere I go. I can't express myself. How can I be funny in this culture?" This is not me speaking. I'm doing the voice of a comedian who's complaining about the sensitivity of audiences, which I actually personally don't agree with.
You don't, because I did this documentary about George Carlin. He was a free speech absolutist to the point where he would use like the one you can't say, the N-word on stage. He did a whole routine about why you can't say it and use the word in that routine. But he said that political correctness was especially pernicious, was the word he used, because it came under the guise of tolerance.
Censorship. Or
no, he said because it comes under the guise of, you're just trying to be nice and make everyone feel, as opposed to, this is a group of people that want to change your speech.
Sure.
Want to change your speech. So again, that's one side of it, and then there's another side of like, I want to go to a comedy club and not have to make people make fun of me or my race or something like that.
Not just going to a comedy club, because everything is now
right. So it's a battle. It's literally a battle of ideas.
Yeah.
On one idea is you want free speech from this person, a comedian, let's say Dave Chappelle, and on the other side is you want to not have your feelings hurt when you go to a comedy club or click online on this comedian or watch their special on Netflix.
Christina, any thoughts?
Yeah, I
about
mean,
this?
I think the thing is the voices that dominated the space or were amplified the most at the beginning of the comedy tend to be male voices, a lot of white voices, and I think now we are able to kind of say, I'm kind of sick of watching this, or I'd like to watch something else, and what I'm sort of seeing is a bit of a siloing of audiences that like I could probably, if I wanted to, the rest of my life just watch. I could find enough media that just looks like me. It's not watched by a ton of people, but I could find it, and I could just bury myself in that and be. There's probably some obscure YouTube channels in there, but that's how I would go. And I think it's Roxane Gay said this well. It's like it's not cancel culture; it's consequence culture, or just being accountable to what you're doing.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lenita, any thoughts about this?
Yeah, I'm thinking about one of the chapters in my book focuses on Kevin Hart, one of the top comedians in the world, and
I think
Kevin
he has
has been
the
known to.
most Instagram followers in the world, or something like that, or maybe the most Twitter followers.
Yeah,
I think it's
wouldn't
him.
be surprised.
Yeah.
But he is lamented, and in fact, some of his stand-up specials have been dedicated to bemoaning the shifting audiences who might critique. He might have a different perspective on cancel culture insofar as the reasons why he did not host the Oscars, which was a lifelong dream of his, was because he was being asked to apologize again for homophobic humor that he had apologized beforehand. He got an assist from Ellen DeGeneres, but ultimately decided, forget it, I'm not going to do it. And to me, that brings up the fact that for some comedians, cancel culture is not just about belated consequences for very virulently sexist, homophobic, what some people experience as violent humor. But some people wonder too, is cancel culture cloaked under the guise of consequence? And Wayne just invoked a word that I'm forgetting. What was that word, Wayne? That
Pernicious?
Bruce,
Tolerance?
tolerance, exactly. Tolerance. That
Pernicious
tolerance
was like 30
and
minutes
consequence.
ago.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. The tolerance and consequence sit under cancel culture, but some people might also feel like it's political, and it's a way to disenfranchise certain kinds of bodies and voices from the mainest stage of the Hollywood scene at the Oscars.
Yeah, this is the exact battle that's going on, and this has always been going on.
Yeah.
So it's just, I feel like now a little more pronounced.
Yeah, there's an ebb and a flow. So maybe we'll see.
I don't know. Right now, there's a lot of flow.
Speaking of flow, let's flow this puppy out to the audience and give you all
this is where it's going to get good.
an opportunity to ask some questions.
Do they go there to that mic?
There's a mic coming down
the
aisle right here, and this gentleman in the front.
So there's just one mic?
Yeah,
no, there's two.
Oh, there's another one too.
I'd like to attack.
Oh, Jesus. Here. Oh, what's this?
Tank.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
But
I thought that was going to be an attack.
Yeah. I was like, this is the
So close.
I thought that was
Will
gonna
Smith
be-
clap. Slap.
So close. I got a slap on the foot.
We could have gone viral if you did that. You want to rethink
Okay,
doing
we have
this?
to take
so
a
we can go
deposition.
viral?
Go ahead.
Where are you from? No, I got. In regards to what you've been talking about, a lot of people won't remember the Michael Richards thing.
Sure,
I wonder
yeah.
if you can explain
Oh,
that.
I'll
and
have
Or
Lenita.
reenact it.
Take on it.
Come on, Zachary.
Lenita, would you like to explain it? Or if you want me to, I will explain it as well.
You fill in the blanks after I finish.
Okay,
Michael
sure.
Richards, as
Yeah.
we know, who plays Kramer on Seinfeld, went to the Laugh Factory, and he really had some things he wanted to say. A diverse group of young folks that included Blacks, Latinos, Asians. I mean, they were just friends. Came in loudly and went to the balcony, and he was very upset about the noise that they were drumming up. Anyway, he had a back and forth with them, and they were assuming, oh, this is that play. This is that, we're going to go back and forth. So they did a couple of back and forths, but then Michael switched voices, and he kind of became angry, and he hurled the N-word. It didn't stop there. He brought up some allusions to slavery, his historical specificity was a bit wrong, but suffice it to say, his quarrel then with two African American men who he had directed his attention to turned into a tete-a-tete, and it turned the comedy club out, and the show ended. And some would say that Michael Richards' career effectively ended too, even though Seinfeld stood up for him and tried to stage a couple of apologies. And Jamie Masada, the owner of the Laugh Factory, had invited him back to apologize, but he didn't. So I read about that in my book. What else would you say about that, Zach?
Yeah, that's wonderful. I also want to point out that in Lanita's book, she has written out the transcript of the event, which is amazing to read without watching the footage, which I believe you might be able to find on the internet. But the transcript is great to watch. But yeah, I think that was.
But the key point of the whole thing is that exchange happened. Somebody had a cell phone.
Yes.
Early cell phone, flip phone, and captured it. And when that went up, that's when the backlash began.
Yeah.
As opposed to just, it's just a weird night in a club, and Michael Richards seems like he's very edgy comedian who's very comfortable using that word and, talking about lynching somebody, however awkward it was. So that's really the key to the whole thing.
Yeah, it is.
In my opinion, right?
It is. It is. In fact, it brings me up to Kevin Hart would say somebody was able to go in the archive and figure out some of those jokes and represent them, calling for him to apologize again. And Michael Richards and Black Comics lamented the fact that if it had not been recorded, Michael Richards' career would have continued to soar. He would have never had to apologize, and this kind of violence would have just happened without consequence.
Right. Any other questions?
So we've been talking about George Carlin and cancel culture, but I also want to bring up the issue of many states making the expression of ideas in universities and such and schools completely illegal. Like Texas just passed, you teach anything diversity related or have any diversity related programs, you could get fired. You pressure students to have certain ideas, you'll get fired. And we all know about Florida and so many other states. Don't say gay. It's a pernicious kind of nationwide trend among conservative states. So I'm curious what you guys see as kind of the comedian's role in pushing back against these kind of ideas. Christina already talked about calling out a comedian who is transphobic, but maybe some other historical ways that comedians have pushed against these broader trends and where that might be going.
So much of what I look to is like a lot of the late night responses to the news cycle of the day, and very much what it is like trying to stay real calm, but like look at that one absurd thing. There's so many, and then just magnify it in the humor. And to take that approach versus this is so wrong, it's so bad, right? Like to just sort of lay out and it's not that that's not the wrong response either, but I think that's the response that those who are trying to stop that expression will jump on and go, you're being angry or being unreasonable. So I've been looking a lot to that as I try to figure out where that shift comes from. For me, like I ran a mask sewing group as a comedian in the pandemic, and I was like, and I very much ran it. This is what FEMA would look like if a comedian ran it. So I do feel like it goes beyond just like jokes, but also like how do we shift the way we gather our communities, the way that we think about organizing and sort of. There's this great thing I learned in. I looked a lot at the Billionaires for Bush during when Bush was president, and they were a group of fake billionaires that would dress like Monopoly men and stuff, and they would march in the protests alongside the people in street clothes, and just like trying to find those subversive responses to these kind of real crises, because it was very hard to arrest these people dressed like billionaires. They're too charming and they're almost like too entertaining, right? So it's trying to figure out like what is how to use and one of the trainings I had gone to, they were like, how do you take your enemy's anger and use it against them versus absorb it and feel unempowered by it, but how can you just quickly hold a mirror to how ridiculous they are and throw it right back.
Another question?
Yeah, howdy.
Hey.
I have a question mainly for Christina, but I want some context from the rest of the panel as well. So you made a show about something that is very much a current historical moment that a lot of art in general has tended to shy away from, in movies and television. Like, if they mention it at all, it's like a throwaway thing. We don't want to touch this. We don't want to get into it. And you very much made a
Show
piece
set
that was
set in the pandemic, yeah.
that's the whole show.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know sort of why you chose to make it so much about the pandemic when so many other people shied away from it. And I wanted to know from the rest of the panel maybe some historical context about other comedy that has been made very much about moments in the moments that they've happened.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because when the pandemic started and I started like gathering bra straps and stuff like that, all my friends who were watching on the sidelines were like, "Is this your next show?" And I was like, "No one wants to watch a show about this. Do you want to relive this? I don't want to relive this." But it became really clear that what I was witnessing as an otherwise unessential person, like I really felt like I was seeing things and seeing the dysfunction of our systems at a close proximity that maybe I should not as a performance artist, right? Like for example, there was a hospital that was shipped broken masks from the federal government, and I had the elastic to fix it because I happened to buy it in the street for cash, like a drug transaction, and and I was like, why am I witnessing this? So to see that, but I think for me, I mostly just started to work on this show to entertain the aunties while they were sewing at their sewing machines. So it was a show that started on Zoom, and I just happened to have this invitation from New York Theater Workshop to premiere it as a live piece. So I feel very lucky that happened because so many other theaters are very reluctant to, oh my God, now we're going to do this again. But I will say what was useful about just embracing it was watching how like late night comedians were dealing with, there was no laughter. Like Colbert just would bring his wife in to laugh at him. And we're suddenly in this place where all the comedians are making jokes and it's landing on nothing. But maybe that was just this moment, right? That we suddenly had to kind of sit in the silence of it. I think one of the most profound SNL episodes is when they all had to shoot at their house, and they were all, Kate McKinnon put like different versions of glasses on her cats. She was describing all the cats for adoption, but it was her one cat, just dressed differently over and over again. It was just like, to me, it was like, okay, that's what helped me think, okay, this is super depressing, but this is just such a strange angle in which to try to find humor and creativity and how to record it in this time. And I think that's also what helped, that it's okay that there's also silence and no live audience laughing.
I sort of completely disagree with the premise of your question. I feel like SNL and late night and comedians talk about what's going on all the time. Like that is literally the juiciest jokes. This goes back to Will Rogers' time. This is like, those are the most potent jokes, are the ones that are, I hate to use the term, ripped from the headlines. Like that's really the basis for a lot of topical comedy. There's a word for it, topical comedy. So I feel like it's done quite, like I feel like comedians do lean into all of that stuff. Especially, I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember Dick Gregory, but he spoke quite at the time about the civil rights movement and actually went down to Selma and stuff like that. So I feel like
are you hearing people address it now in
yes,
media?
all the time.
Well, I think the differentiation, correct me if I'm wrong, but that you were making was not just within comedy, but within the entertainment business as at large, and that streaming networks and studios definitely were avoiding.
Yeah, they still are. They're very much avoiding
the pandemic.
Yeah,
no one talked about the pandemic,
or as a premise, or as a time period for what's going on. Like if you watch Succession, for example.
Yeah.
The pandemic never happened in Succession, and there are many shows that exist that just reject or deny or avoid because So will you apologize?
I did. I looked at him. I don't want to get attacked again by another person.
Zach,
by the audience.
Zach, I'm also thinking about in my book I talk about key historical moments over the past decade that comics have confronted, and I start with 9/11.
Thank you.
And I talk about Black comics talking about 9/11 humor, Hurricane Katrina humor.
Thank you.
And one thing I remember about
I love it.
Yeah, one of the things I remember about 9/11 humor is that nobody was touching it. Jay Leno wasn't touching it. Letterman wasn't touching it. Why? Because the terrorist attacks had happened in New York, among other places, and the feeling was that it was raw and too early.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
so I was really frightened. That's about when I began my project. I wanted to see if Black comics had something to say. So I inched my way to the clubs around October 2001, and on the sign there was a sign at the Comedy Union, which is was a premier Black owned comedy club in Los Angeles, and the owner, Inns Mitchell, was actually discouraging people from speaking about 9/11 humors in a haphazard, cavalier way. He was attentive to it too. And one of the first comedians I ever heard tell a joke about 9/11 was Ian Edwards, a Black comedian from the diaspora. And his joke was, "Hey, everybody, this is a Black comedian talking to a predominantly Black audience at a time when not a lot of comics were dealing with this." And he invoked race immediately. He said, "Hey, everybody, there's a new N-word in town." He actually used the word. And he said, "The Arab is a new N-word." And in this way, he was building on riffs that we heard from Richard Pryor, who talked about Vietnamese children during the Vietnam War being adopted by white Americans because they were the new loved in words in some regards that needed protecting. But that was a joke that set my project off. A joke that somebody was willing to tell about a historical moment that many comedians remained silent about.
There was an audience response to that joke, correct, Lenita?
Yes, it was. Thank you for remembering, Zach.
Yes.
And that's what gave me longitudinal chase. It was so he said the joke. And of course, I know Inns Mitchell, the owner, was probably like, "How's this going to land?" And within a beat, a Black woman in the audience said, "Finally," because for her, and I think for Ian, they read the joke not as, "Yay, anybody who looks Arab is now the new N-word," and that takes the pressure off of us, although that was a premise that circulated in the clubs. It was more that they recognized that Arab Americans, Indians, anybody who looked remotely foreign were going to be targeted for racial profiling, and there was some type of empathetic recognition of that as a fellow minoritized subject.
Well, I think it's fitting that we end on this kind of,
Jeez.
I guess, mixed note, because I do believe in comedy as being an amazing platform, as Wayne was talking about, to address these difficult issues and to process them as a community. And speaking of this community that is abandoning us currently, I want to thank our panelists. Let's give a round of applause for Lenita Jacob.
We'll be up there. We'll be up there.
Christina Wong, Wayne Fetterman. Yes, these two will be up there signing their books in the lobby.
Come say hi.
Come say hi. Thank you all so much for coming. It was an absolute joy to have you all, and enjoy the rest of the fest.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and visit us at podcast.usc.edu.